This is the second day of the September 89 7-day retreat at Springwater. What was most frequently talked about in meetings since the last talk is fear. Fear and anxiety. So we will begin this talk looking at fear. One of the questions that always comes up is, how do I look at fear? Or what to do with anxiety when it comes up? Or is fear the most fundamental of our problems, affecting everything else we do or don't do? Again, in talking about fear, let this not be a talk about something, thinking about something, even though thought is involved in talking and in listening. To look at fear, the fear that one has maybe most recently or most frequently experienced can be evoked, which takes memory. But then to look at it directly, if that's possible. Not just think about it, which is one step removed, at least, from the actuality of this thing we call fear. What is this thing we call fear? Anxiety, anguish. Most of the time when we ask ourselves that, we point to some spot in our body: sternum, solar plexus, stomach, intestines. Very few times we point to our head when we think or talk about fear. It's what the thought, a fearful thought has manifested that we call fear, the physical symptom. Which, when it manifests, we want to do anything but be with that, anything but touch that, be in complete unconditional contact with it. That's the last thing we want to do. Over the years, the habits have built up, mental, physical, physiological habits, to get away from this uncomfortable feeling that has hit us. Very often, one doesn't know why it hit, it just came. Suddenly there was fear. Often one is not aware of any thoughts or memories that have evoked this uncomfortable, diseasing state. And with the attempt to escape from it, conflict arises. Because This thing doesn't just go away because there's escape or distraction or going into fantasy or whatever. It remains at some level. So maybe that's the first question one can ask oneself. The next time, which may be now or whenever, this thing strikes, the feeling of fear or anxiety, whatever it may be for each particular individual. A sinking feeling of panic, of falling apart or whatever. Can one, instead of going the habitual way of escape, wonder what this is and face it? We'll try to become more explicit about what facing is. But the first thing is one willing to investigate this? Interested in it? What the eeriest of feelings actually is by touching it. All the language that is used is dualistic, as though there was someone who's doing that. But the someone is the fear. At that moment, I'm fear. There's not someone separate from that fear who's suffering it. There's only fear and then the thought about fear. I have it. I don't like it. I must overcome it or get rid of it. And these thoughts create the someone who has it and could do something about it, or even can face it. So we will be very careful with these words, not to create the idea or reinforce the already existing idea that there's someone there who has it and could do something about it. What we call the willingness or the interest to find out what this is that has haunted one, maybe all one's life. Not just maybe, it has. Because our fears start in our earliest stages of life. The interest or willingness to face it is not a dualistic process. It is the absence of resistance. The absence of all the thoughts that would have us believe we can't stand this or we can't face it. The absence of any way out, the absence of any choice to escape. Is that it? So that all that's left is what's there? An organism triggered into a state of whatever. The word doesn't touch it. On the contrary, the word, by already knowing what fear is removing, is blocking the direct contact. So in wondering when this thing flares up, in wondering what it is, even though the word fear, anguish, or anxiety, or panic may hover in the mind, to not be detained by that, or blocked by that, or lured into knowledge about it, knowing about it from the past, remembering what it always has been like, and how horrible it has been, or whatever. But to leave that escape of naming it, we'll call it escape. Leave that aside. The naming may have happened, but the name one can see is not this state of being that is alive right now. Alive with sensations and urges. Whatever. It's for us to find out. And can that finding out be unconditional? By unconditional is meant not knowing what the outcome will be in this complete meeting. And it's not meeting of me and my fear. We went through that. It's the absence of any distance, the absence of any separation. Just that, what has been a threat, a seeming danger all our life. For the first time, just that. What is it? One may be on the verge of going to sleep, whether in bed or in the daytime, and a frightening thought strikes. If one is lying in bed with this unconditional being there, the sleep is gone. It's not the mode of sleeping to unconditionally be with something that is taking place. So can there be a letting go of the mode of sleeping? In other words, not the conflict, oh, I wanted to sleep right now. I didn't want this. But this is there. Or waking up with a frightening thought from a frightening thought. The dream isn't able to lull over it. It's a waking up. Unconditionally there with the pain, the disease, the discomfort, whatever it is. Is that difficult? It is difficult because there's so many avenues have been forged in our wiring system from the brain to the body and back up to the brain to escape, to react, to resist, to withdraw. But they are not totally hidden. It's possible to be aware of them. Particularly, it's possible to be aware of them when there is this overriding interest to finally find out what this is. Not find out, be in touch with it, be there with it. Not running away for the 100,000th time. It sounds like a vow, does it, or like a determination. But it's not a vow. We earlier said it is no choice. Maybe it is the first realization that there is no choice but to be with something that has haunted one and has haunted and is haunting human beings all over the world since time immemorial. The fear of we could fill an hour naming all the fears. Fear of loneliness, abandonment, not being loved, being rejected, being a failure, making a fool of oneself. Fear of losing a job, fear of losing a mate, a child, fear of losing anything that one is attached to out of fear. Out of fear, we attach to people, to things, to position, career, possessions. And that fear is not eliminated by attaching to these things or people. There's always the fear of losing it. Anything that we treasure to have, to keep, to feel good, not to feel afraid, brings the fear of losing it. Yes, the fear of getting old. Strange thing that people after 40 think they're getting old and are afraid of that. There's a real mystique, particularly in this country, that there's something that happens after one is 40. And of course, the thought evokes fear, whether it has any true message or not. That is, we'll talk about that more when we come to what all fear is triggered by. Of course, then there's fear of getting 50, there's fear of getting 60 and 70, and fear of dying, which doesn't happen after 40, of course. I remember very early in life being afraid of losing my mother, father, our maids, the house, and the fear of dying, being killed, put in concentration camp, bombed out. I was afraid of everything. Very vivid imagination, steeped in Grimm's fairy tales, which I read over and over. Only certain ones. I never wanted to read new ones, but the old ones. Little Red Riding Hood, gulped down by the wolf. But that's the beauty of these fairy tales. It always ends well. That's probably why I had to read it, to read the happy ending. But it didn't assuage the fears. They were there. Anything I could think of that could happen to me, which I did, plenty, I was afraid of. And much later in life, once sort of perusing all of these fears that I've had all my life, there was only one of them that came true. Not any other did. And I spent so much time thinking about what could happen and afraid of what could happen, and then smarting from this state of fear. And yet when some crisis happened, we've often talked about it, then without even being intellectually aware of it, there was energy to meet it. And energy to meet a crisis is not ridden with that same fear that haunts us when we imagine a crisis and what we would do or couldn't do, what would happen to us. The imagination of things that could happen has a different energy than a crisis met. A crisis met does not allow extraneous thoughts. So somehow a great intelligence takes possession of the body to be there, look clearly what needs to be done or not be done, which excludes the roaming around of extraneous thoughts with their connections. And then afterwards, when the crisis is over, then this other thing takes over again, imagining what could have happened. And fear again. So all the fears that I started listing and then going somewhat into a biographical thing. Someone could say, well, is there no function to thought imagining what could happen? Yes, there is a function to it. That's why thought is operating. To imagine that lightning could strike a house and then put lightning rods on. We have that here. Partly because I always used to be afraid of our house at home being struck by lightning. I insisted that we have lightning rods. Maybe it wasn't so smart. Remembering something that has been dangerous or fatal, not to do that again. Not to touch something hot or eat something that is poisonous, has turned out to be poisonous. Has had to be a first time when humankind experimented with these things and then passed this on, this knowledge of what not to do. That's based on thought and memory and anticipation. But thought can imagine the wildest thing, anything happening, and scare this whole organism, put the whole organism into a total state of imbalance. By imagining something that may never happen. Based on something one has imagined in the past, read, heard, put together for different reports. Thought is infinitely malleable with the use of memory to project things that may happen. And one can talk about this, but it may not at all help, because the moment thought imagines something that could happen, it seems real, because the fear is there. This physical manifestation of the symptoms of fear. Stomach, solar plexus, pressure in the chest, increased heart rate, maybe difficulty with breathing, narrowing of the senses, maybe muscular tension, and ache, pain in the back or shoulders, wherever. That lends credibility to the thought of what may happen. And this, I'm not preaching or theorizing. That is observable. It's observable when this unconditional being with all the symptomatology, all the stuff that the body puts out, when that is not escaped from, not by a hairbreadth escaped from. Then one can tell that the moment there is a hairbreadth for a new thought, that thought says, there must be something dangerous about here because of the way I feel. So a state of being triggered by a thought projecting something that could happen, that state can again trigger to the brain that there is something dangerous about to happen. It's so real. One wouldn't feel afraid, says whatever logic this brain has at times. One wouldn't feel so afraid if there wasn't something to be afraid of. And if one can notice this reverse connection, there's a tremendous relief in understanding something is a false alarm. Just because one is shivering doesn't mean there's something to be afraid of. And if by completely being there with this, there isn't any communication to the brain, there's something to be afraid of, and the brain's starting to look for things that could be happening, then that whole thing doesn't happen. Then there's just a slowing down, a coming into equilibrium of this unbalanced or thrown out of balance organism. It quiets down. It takes its own time, its own speed, whatever. If there's not new fuel, new input. And one of the new inputs we talked about at one meeting is the very thought, I have anxiety right now. I'm in a state of anxiety. Some thought one didn't catch aroused anxiety. And then speaking to ourselves about we feel, which we do. We make statements all the time to ourselves, about our present state of being. And this verbalization or internal talk, internal thinking about our state itself adds to the anxiety. This person said, yes, it is so. The moment I say I'm in a state of anxiety, I feel more anxious. Again, don't believe the person who said it, but find out for oneself. It is so. Because linked with the statement, I'm in a state of anxiety, is this is going to get worse. And one can feel it already. The physical feeling, again, gives credence to that apprehension that it's going to get worse, because it's already gotten worse because we've said I'm in a state of anxiety. And then the next thought is, will this ever end? Probably not. It'll last. It'll go on forever. One may not put it succinctly like that, but there is a deep assumption, whatever state we're in. I don't know why that is, but it is so, that this will last forever. Whatever it is, depression or sadness, sorrow, fear. And, of course, an assumption, even if it's hiding someplace there implicitly, that this will last forever, does not bring cheer. It adds to the feeling of depressedness, which again sends signals about how we are, and that there's something to be depressed about. So can one begin by investigating this to become deeper and deeper aware of the cyclicalness of our thoughts and emotions? Thoughts generating emotions, and very often the first thought has not been caught. It's gone unnoticed. There was no awareness. It's not impossible to be unaware of the first thought, but it doesn't matter whether one is aware of it or not. One can watch at any one time, unconditionally, meaning not with a motive to get rid of this thing, because that's not unconditional. Then there are gaps there. Expectations, setting oneself up for disappointment or whatever, frustration. And the amazing thing is that in this kind of complete questioning or complete examining, complete witness or energy gathers. An energy that has the capacity to shed light on what is happening. And the whole question which we started out with, namely, what do I do about fear? What do I do about a state of panic or anxiety? What can I do about it? That question of doing becomes irrelevant. In the attending, there is no doer. There's only attention of what's shedding light on what is happening. The doer is thought. I must get rid of this. I don't like this. It will last forever. What can I do? That's thought. That's the thought that brings about the fear. Whether the thought is, I must do something about it, or I am getting older, I will die, I will lose my lover, it's all the same thought. Different content, but it is the process of thought. Arousing the fear, and then the idea that I should do something about it. Is that hard to see? to see that fear is aroused by thought is not so hard to see, is it? Even though one missed the first thought that got the body going, we all are very intimate with thinking scary thoughts about the future based on the past. Getting sick, not having enough money. Of course one could say, no, this isn't thought, that's real. I may not have enough money, but at this moment, this thought. Whether or not one will have enough money, that situation isn't there right now. And if that actually happens, that one has no money, then maybe there'll be the energy to do something about it. To work for somebody who has some money. Doing something. So that one can buy something to eat. But can one begin to see that it is thought that triggers the fear, and that the feeling of fear triggers more thought, which compounds this eerie feeling, sometimes to a state of utter panic. Thought can go that far. And then is one going to go someplace to get medication for anxiety attack? Or can one, I don't know, it's up to each one of us, sit down with this thing, find a moment. A moment of time, or of no time, to investigate what is going on. Come hell or high water. Not knowing the outcome. Sticking with it, as it were. Sticking with it just means the absence of escape. One person asked me, is it all right to live with fear? Of course it is. What choice do we have if it's there? Either living with it in suppressing this thing, or allowing it to reveal itself, show itself from all sides. And wondering what keeps this going, what nourishes it, what fuels it, what triggers it. It's possible to watch all of that, to be aware of it. And to see the immensely powerful functioning of thought in all of that. Thought based on past experiences, whether one's own or others, through talking or reading, and the possibility to project itself into what it calls the future, which is also thought. There's no future. There's only now. There's only this moment. Future is an anticipation in thought. based on past experiences. To be in touch with the fact that the whole anxiety-provoking process of time, what happened in the past, what will happen to me in the future, is carried by this vehicle of thought. Thought producing the feeling of past and future, past in which something scary happened, the future in which it may happen again or worse. All of it happening right now, right this instant of thinking. Because even the memory stored in the brain is functioning now. The deposits happened in the past, but it's functioning. The memory functioning is now. The whole past is functioning now, this instant. In pondering about this, the thought may come up, how can I avoid this particular functioning of thought? So I will not get myself into this constant fear, anticipating of frightening things. And then maybe evolving a program of thought control, controlling thought so it cannot do these scary things. And yet, thought control is also thought. It needs thought to control thought. And in practicing some thought control, people will say, I'm constantly drifting off into daydreaming pleasant things, pleasurable things. See, this is the other side of thought, or the other capacity of thought, not just to create eerie feelings in the body based on past experiences, remembered things, and projected crises, but it can also produce the most pleasurable feelings in the body. Based on past experiences. There's a strong attachment to that functioning of thought to produce pleasure, to bring about pleasurable sensations, daydreams or fantasies. Can one see that it's the same vehicle, producing the scare, producing the pleasure? And the same vehicle that says I have to control all of that? Because without control, it will not end. It will torment me. One doesn't mind so much about the pleasurable things, but if one is set on controlling thought and emptying the mind, then the pleasurable fantasies also become a torment in a way, because they distract from the thought of a goal, the goal of the mind being empty of thought and therefore empty of trouble. And what we're wondering is whether thought, without any controlling devices, controlling methods or practices, just by being understood as it functions, can slow down on its own. Not through any heroic measure. Just by listening with some interest to the whole drama of the human life, created by thought, and listening without judgment. We always come back to that. Listening without condemning, without accepting, without evaluating right or wrong, good or bad. A listening that in itself is empty of knowing what is right or wrong, good or bad. Just listening, looking, discovering. And in the listening and looking and discovering, openly in touch with the song of the insect, the rumbling of the plain. The breath, shallow or deep, or at times not there at all, heart pounding, whatever feelings the thoughts have evoked, in touch with the whole thing. And yet not in any position for it or against it. We're talking about the listening, the openness. Call it what you will. Attention, awareness. It's not listening to the insects in order to get away from anything. That's there. It's not getting away. It's there. Just as much as the sinking feeling in the solar plexus, or the tenseness in the stomach, or the pain in the back. Thought arising, will this last forever? If one isn't caught in the content of it, then the arising of a thought is like the rumbling of an airplane. It may have already connected with an emotion. That's interesting. It's happened already. Bing, bing. Goes very fast. Maybe not as fast as I just demonstrated. Just read a little while ago that in examining lie detector process, that it takes 3 seconds from giving a stimulating word to the person who's being tested, 3 seconds before some emotional or skin resistance response registers on a scale. So it's not completely instantaneously that a thought triggers emotion. There's some gap in there. After all, it takes some time for the chemical or electricity to travel. Not much. But people have observed that. It's possible to observe it. That in a certain state of being in which there is this openness of listening, of being, a disturbing thought may not trigger a disturbing emotion. It doesn't. The connection doesn't happen because there's openness, listening, and the energy that goes. The energy is not the energy of brawn. Sometimes somebody says, you talk about energy, but I feel so tired. It doesn't matter. There can be this energy of awareness and while being tired. It's not the energy of enthusiasm or goal-orientedness or winning a match or something. One has the feeling it is the energy that permeates everything. That's alive, including the rocks, the stars. Not to grope and grasp for that energy, but to be in touch with fear, or whatever's there, unconditionally. And that's there too. We will end here for today.